Hi, my name is Arun. Welcome back to my channel. In this video, I'm going to give some details about the recent interview conducted by jpmc. The first round is already been given in a coding test, which is already prepared in my previous video. I can share the link in this video. And the next interview is followed by technical discussion, which is like three or two people is actually be there, but in my case two people are there, so each the one person ask some questions about it and another person will be a design type of questions. So but in this section I'm not able to proceed further because I'm unable to answer it for a few questions. And okay, in this video I'm going to give some details about like which where it was failed and where it was actually able to answer the questions. As long as you have a 10 years, more than 10 years of experience, so the expectation is like designing skills and architectural skills. The, the questions may come up like what's best practices used when designing the application in microservices, and what's the best practices you followed before starting the application, before designing the application. What is the best resilience patterns used to make more application resilience? Generally, the questions from the interviewer come like design elements, architecture elements, aspects, and implementation approach and solutioning. The architecture from end to end solution, whether it works fine or not. So, because once the joining into the project, you should be handle all the implementation part, design part, and architectural part. Because some of the projects may not have the solution architect, so we should be able to pick it up this from end to end, including the development. So the questions are based on like that only. Coming to the best practices out of the 12 factor app, and so what I explained like code base, dependencies, config, backing services, build, run, release processes, concurrency, port binding, disability, and dev, fraud parity, logs, admin process. So these are the I think one more backlogging services. So these are the best 12 practices which we generally follow that. So we need to justify like which uh, which one you actually using it in the project. Code base, azure source control, version control, that would be fine. So that's no much questions on it. Dependencies, so what are the jar dependencies that we will be doing it, that's not no much questions on it. Config, so the best configs like wherever the any configuration challenges like configuring the Kafka or configuring any middlewares, MQ, so that any problems when we do configuring we need to explain it. So the questions may come randomly. So what is the different problems you faced during the configuration? And also the backing of applications, like how you making the backing of applications, like so we do in a cloud, like how you are making the backing of application and how you communicate once you backing up application, so that we need to explain it. Build, release, and run we anyway we use for Jenkins configuration, Jenkins pipeline. Sometimes we have to write our own pipeline to run the code, because the Groovy script people may not be people will be there, or if not there, then the interviewer expectation is to write the Groovy script as well to build the pipelines. About a port binding, so we will publish the services through specific port. So it is like self-contained architecture. So some questions, random questions on like how you publish a servicing with the port binding. This possibility again, this like the flexibility which can stop and start on demand to facilitate and scaling up quickly and deploy the code and configuration changes. So just like we have flexibility and like, so the cloud provides the best feature whenever we start and stop the services, and that kind of disk possibility should be there. So the questions may be like when the interviewer also asks like what's the disposability you followed it when building the application. Again, the logs configurations, like the production and dev pre-prod, and this, whether the logs have been separated, and so, and this configuration like Splunk graphite sheets, so to match your actual there's some metrics which require by supporting require some metrics, whether we are just followed that all the metrics, all the standards or not, so that we should be able to explain it. And we should choose of the like after this, or out of 12 factors we should choose any of these best practices, and should be able to explain which related to the project which has been done. So the concentration of this mostly the interview is like mostly like designing and architecture. Next, another set of questions may come up like the resilience pattern, the best resilience pattern that has been used it, and I've explained a few resilience patterns, so which is related to the project and why it is used and what is the how you or make it back means make the application back whenever the service crashes. For me, that's most of the questions on me, like the resilience patterns, like client side load balancing, circuit breaker, fallback, and bulkhead. It's asking first like why the what is the use case of the circuit breaker. Circuit breaker pattern ensures that a service client does not repeatedly call for a failing services. So that in he'll ask the next questions like where and why we should use. Can you explain me this full pattern? The actual use case is to prevent the problem in a service instance from cascading up to the consumer services and use the client resilience. That's why we use the circuit breaker, pattern. The circuit breaker, it is just simply avoiding making calls to the failing service. Hence, the fallback pattern to create a alternative paths to in order to retrieve the data or execute any specific action when the service fails. This is the basic use case for the circuit breaker pattern. Now again jump into the client side load balancing. It's like the client side, the questions like the client side load balancing involves having the client to look up the services of the individual instance from the service from a discovery agent, and also ask about like what is the class used to find out all the physical locations of the server. So that's a discovery client. So that is expectation is to explain like how the discovery client can be imported into our Spring Boot application, get all the services used along with the URI. So get retrieve all the information about the services used by registering the Eureka server from the pool of services locations it maintains. He's asking the best usage example when a circuit breaker is used. So I explained like when a licensing service start running out of resources because of calling some other sub services which also running slow because of calling some other services. Eventually, all three applications stop responding because of they run out of services while waiting for the request to complete. Hence, the whole scenario could be avoided if the circuit breaker pattern is implemented for each point where the distributed resource is called. So that is the best usage of the circuit breaker resilience pattern. And also another question about like what's the key benefit having this circuit breaker uh, resilience pattern. The fail fast means like when a remote service is experiencing any degradation, the application will fail fast and prevent the resource exhaustion issues and feign granularity. By timing out or failing fast, a circuit breaker pattern gives the ability to fail gracefully or seek alternative mechanisms to carry out the user's intent and recover seamlessly with the circuit breaker pattern acting as a intermediary. The circuit breaker can periodically check and see if the resource being requested back to online or re-enable access it without any human intervention. I've explained it like what is the applicable scenarios, the advantages, disadvantages, what's the key benefits, what's the use case, what's the um, actual motive of this circuit breaker. But the interviewer it requires more information, how like end to end architectural perspective, like any is expected more. But whatever I know that I have explained it, but in this case, he was not much happy. But he is expecting more on this, like the failure patterns. What's the problem starting? What's the problems you received? What's the problems you retrieved? What's the problem we you have solved it? So that we have to explain it. The next thing in the discussion is that how you are implemented the circuit breaker implementation and what's the configuration has been done for to implement this. The first thing is that import the form.xml in a dependency, and the second thing is that circuit breaker annotation and mention the service name in a annotation and define you for particular method, which method you are going to declare. So the circuit breaker annotation applicable to the method. Under the default URL for circuit breaker, we can give it as a health actuator health. So if anything is not available, it goes to the health and then gives the health path, which we will define in an actuator. Right. Coming to the configuration in a YML file, resilience 4J circuit breaker we need to define and instances. So what's the service name? If the define as something like some X service, and register health indicator. There are some tags: ring buffer size, enclose open state, off state, with duration, open state, failure rate threshold. Like these are the some fields are there that you need to give that, and based on your project. And if you define as there are some service like why another service, so you need to give all the rest of the parameters in a YML file. Register, most importantly, register health indicator, off open, off close, open state, and the most important, the failure rate threshold. And one person is asking me about what is the default value for a open status. So the default value is 60,000 seconds. And also he asked me like, how you record exceptions. So there is a record exception field which will be considered as a failures. By default, all the exceptions are recorded as a failures in a record exceptions field. And the next thing about the fallback strategy, like how what is the sequence you followed for a fallback strategy with the resilience project. So I explained like, so we need to do two things. First, we need to add fallback method attribute to circuit breaker annotation, and that attributes may contain the method of called like resilience would say interrupts called because of the failure. And the second thing is that define the for it must reside into the name of the class into the original that has been protected by circuit breaker. So to create the fallback method in a resilience, we need to create a method that contains the same signature as the function plus extra parameter, which is a target exception parameter, if you want to add more to capture all the exceptions. In the same way that like we can it's the same question about the bulkhead pattern as well. So the resilience for j dot bulkhead in a form.xml we are going to define, and the same parameters is applicable like maximum duration, max current calls for a bulk overhead, which you define, and the same annotation um, like how you are using for a circuit breaker, bulk head, and you have to provide the name of the service. Okay, and the fallback method, you need to give the fallback method into the annotation, which both we can put it as both annotation to the method, which is the method available, which method you are thinking to add the annotation. And also on top of that, I'm also explain like, something like retrieve annotation, which in case of anything like sets the instance and fallback method for retrieve pattern. Also mentioned it retrieve name, retrieves annotation, and to mention the name of the service, and as well as fallback method. It is all three are same as it. So, but we can use this annotations as part of the method we are going to give it as part of this resilience patterns. And the next question is about the thread local. So it asked me suddenly the thread local, but I don't have any idea about the thread local before. I never used it. But here in a, I mean, I'm unable to justify it why unable to use it. But here later on when I inquiring it, like Google it, like so this is a thread local class which captures a particular thread, and in a use context holder class stores the user context in a thread local class. So it's the only once stored in a thread local in any code executed all for the request will use a user context object stored in a user context holder. So it's like more about the thread safe. So later on I just googled it, so I got information. But here the few of the instances I'm unable to justify the interview, so that's why the interview was not uh, positive. I am thinking as of my knowledge. So hopefully I will get it in next month. Will come to know the decision. But as of now, I feel like a few of the questions I'm unable to justify. The next thing is about how, like, question is about like how your what is the service gateway you used it and how you configure it. So I explained like the cloud service gateway I have used it. So first thing is that first I put this in pom.xml about the gateway. I have taken it gateway pom.xml, and the second thing is that in defining in bootstrap.yml file this application name as like gateways server and the cloud config URL anyway we are giving it about this what is the port number and all. So my cloud gateway service has to interact with the Eureka server, which is defined it so that I have explained like uh, it has a requirement to communicate with Eureka server. So I need to define the configuration in Spring configuration servers. Like I need to define a separate port in a YAML file and name of the, I mean, registered with Eureka, I mean, client name, like registered with Eureka as mentioned as true. And also use the annotation like at the rate of enable Eureka client in a API gateway server application. So it means that when the main method we generally use a Spring Boot applications, right? So that you need to add another tag enable Eureka client to the method. So for that, so that it knows about this the configuration. It knows about like we have configured the routing gateway for it. The next thing is that dynamically how the routing configuration is changing in a Spring Boot application. So what actually makes your dynamic reloading of route? So I explained like the actuator gateway routes endpoint we should see in when we are doing the actuator pom.xml. So the gateway routes will endpoint will return the number of the gateway route which is currently which gateway is pointing it to that. So the Spring actuator exposes the post-based endpoint route actuator gateway refresh. This will cause to reload the routing configuration. Once the actuator gateway refresh is reached, then enter the routes endpoint. You will see the different routes. So this is the way how this dynamic routing get be changed. And also the next question in extension to that is like how you can this filter it how we can make a filter it. So during defining in a gateway server.yaml file, like the YAML file, so you define your routes, ID, URL, and apart from this we need to define predicates, filters, so that it will be filter your request and predicates any predicates or there just we need to define all the predicates in a YAML file. The next question is about like how you are going to track multiple microservice means users request across all multiple microservices, how you track it. So I just understand that this question is extension to the gateway. So I just realized that this okay this will be a straightforward. Uh, mm, so what I explained like the TMX correlation ID should be associated along with each request. If the TMX correlation ID is not present on the HTTP header, then the gateway tracking filter will generate and set the correlation ID. If it is already present, then it's no action on it. But if it is not present, then it will create by a gateway. So just need to explain some pseudocode. So if we like a filter utils is a common functionality used for all the filters for a gateway. So when actually the TMS correlation is not present, so we just implement this method and passing the HTTP headers Okay, and get the correlation ID. If the correlation ID is present, we'll get from the list of headers like request header dot get correlation ID and return header dot stream dot find first dot get. So return the string of the correlation ID. If not, that is not present. So we just need, so like, what is the pseudocode for it? How to retrieve the TMX correlation ID? I've explained to that. So the extension to that, how do you set the TMX correlation ID? So we need to implement the method like, so whatever set request header and define the server web exchange parameter, string name and string value. So pass to that and then set the method. If the TMS correlation is not present, this is the way we set server exchange, which returns the object and implement the set request header and passing the server web exchange. From there, after returning this, then we can set correlation ID like set request header on exchange token and correlation ID and correlation ID. The next question extension to that, like how you mapping the correlation ID. So the same way, like when we implementing this servlet filters, here we can implement this our class by implementing the filter and pass the parameter, override the method do filter, servlet request and servlet response and filter chain. So from there, we can get from the context user context holder dot get context and set the correlation ID from the whatever the header we are getting it, like HTTP servlet request header dot get header. So we can set in the another way by implementing the filter chain, because the user context class holds all the HTTP header values from individual service client request processed by every microservice. Yeah, mostly the questions are like architecture based and then designing questions. So it's not but this interview is not a straightforward, but mostly the interviewer is looking more experience on designing and architecture skills